If you understand the proper historical context of holy war, it was used rarely. It was used for a specific purpose. I don't know if you want to get into all the ins and outs of the theology of the Canaanites and all that and their struggle with the Israelites, but yes, at a certain time, at a certain place, it was God mandated. That is in the Scripture, and it's a tough one, but I agree with you. It is a tough one.
Killing non-virgin brides, that's ethical.
In that theocracy, if you understood the meaning behind it and the fact that it was hardly ever done, but the point was there was a point trying to be made.
Okay. And now God has changed his mind and we're not supposed to kill those people anymore.
No, I don't think God changes his mind. Boy, I think to be around a God like that, I don't think I could trust him. But no, like I say, God's revelation is progressive. It unfolds and it goes deeper. Its implications are greater. But in point of order, Jesus made the obedience to the Old Testament law not easier to live by. He made it harder. The Old Testament law said, "Thou shalt not murder." Not necessarily kill. "Thou shalt not murder." Jesus said, "Well, that really means you call someone a fool. You murdered him." He makes it tough. Let me tell you, you kind of need a gospel as a result. Or grace.
Okay, so I don't believe in your God. Should I be worried?
Yeah.
That you're going to kill me?
Yeah.
You're going to kill me?
Am I going to kill you? Oh, could I? No. Maybe I did think by 357 at home.
If God keeps changing his mind about who we're supposed to kill, how do we keep track?
Yeah, no, we are
He might change his mind again, and there might be some more people on his hit list.
No, again, since we're not living in Old Testament Israel where it's a nation state defending itself against other nation states and internal division, no, we don't apply those commandments in that regard anymore.
It's probably not 5 minutes, right?
The great political philosopher John Stuart Mill talked about free speech in a free society and indicated that the reason that you want it is either because you hear speech that you agree with and it affirms your beliefs, or you hear speech that you disagree with and it causes you to either maybe question or to add a little sunlight to some of the things you thought. And so for this purpose tonight, I think this was a very excellent discussion. I think there's a lot to chew on, and before we get to the questions from the audience, let's thank both of our speakers for an outstanding time. Okay, now we'll welcome some questions from the audience. We have microphones set up in both corners here. If you've got something to address to one of the speakers in particular, that's always nice. If you have a general question, though, that's fine as well. And again, please keep your questions to 30 seconds or under, and please keep them as questions, not as personal statements or arguments. Let's go ahead and start over here, sir.
Hello. My question is directed for Mr. Berkshire. And this isn't, trying to be like a gotcha statement or anything. This is a reiteration of last year's question, as I remember it, which was, can religion be a force for good in the world? Can it be a force for good?
It can be if you've created the God in your own image and you're a decent person. Then it can be.
Thank you.
Reverend McMurray, he kept asking or telling Mr. Berkshire to cite his sources. And the audience said there could see him citing sources from his own experience, from his own mind, from his own conclusions. So I'd like to ask if a person is struggling with morality, cheating on his wife, drinking too much, goofing off at work, he realizes what the negativism of his behavior, and he changes it. And then it's no longer there, and he improves himself. Is that good as if people would recognize it if it came from the blood of Christ? Is it the same good?
Okay, you can talking to this thing again, sorry. It's good. Of course, it's always good when you don't beat up your wife and don't cheat and don't steal and all that thing. Yeah, no argument about that. But but we're arguing degrees. And, you know, as a Christian pastor, I would always recommend go to the ultimate source of goodness. Go to God. Go to Christ. Yes, there are vestiges of goodness within each of us because we're all created in the image of God. And that's certainly, there's good and the worst of us that we can pull keys out into the open and lead to reform. But to really do the trick, to reform from the inside out, it's the blood of Christ that'll do the trick, that'll do it there, most effectively and most permanently and for eternity.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McMurray, I was struck as a biologist by you stating that you prefer to splat or squash bats and rats. I'm curious as to how far you'd go as a Christian to extend that antipathy to non-human animals.
Hyperbole, my friend, hyperbole.
Is there room for it when there's such a concern for the loss of valuable biodiversity and ecology?
Oh, I have a little kitty cat, I have a little dog, I have fish and knife, and my daughter collected everything that walked, creaked, talked, or squawked, or bit, or slithered, or hissed, and God love them all. They're all God's creatures. And one of the works that influenced me most powerfully was Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, as she examined the wonderful biodiversity of this world, and it brought her back to her faltering Catholic faith.
So I would hope that we could learn and not be dismissive of lessons from non-human animals in terms of the very nature of human actions.
Yes, sir.
For Mr. Berkshire, 3 quick questions. 1, you have read the complete Bible?
No, I haven't read the whole thing.
Okay.
It's not to my taste in literature.
That's fine. Number 2, what you do then profess, you have read and you have decided to accept the negative of the Bible?
I admit there's good and bad parts, and both of them are being attributed to a God. And so when you pick the good parts, you're picking it based on something outside the Bible, your own sense of human decency, and that's how you can reject the bad things that God says, allegedly says, and accept the good things.
And then you have read the New Testament?
Parts of it.
Okay. And the one part have you read where Christ said, I've not come to dismiss the law, but to fulfill the law?
Right. I mean, that's really frightening considering what the Old Testament law was.
So, then to you, what is Christ? This is my last question. Or who is Christ? The Christ.
A human being. I have no reason to think otherwise.
So, no reason to think he's a great human being, or a liar and a lunatic. Either one.
Or a legend. You don't forget that, Al. Lord, liar, lunatic, or legend. We don't know if he said anything that's attributed to him. You admit that there's nothing in his own handwriting, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my question's for Pastor McMurray. Your whole ideology is basically Judeo-Christian, and I would suggest that that's because you were born in Peoria, Illinois. If you had been born in Bangkok, Thailand, you'd probably be Buddhist. And my question is, 70% of the world is non-Christian, and there were thousands of gods before the Judeo-Christian God was invented, Thor and Odin and all these others. How do you know that you're praying to the right God when the other thousands have been rejected over the years? And 7% of the world does not believe in Jesus Christ. How do you know you're praying to the right person?
Well, you're right. I was born in a Christian context, raised in a Christian home, and in essentially a Christian subculture. So that's what I can speak to. That's what I know something about. I don't want to speak on behalf of Buddhists and Muslims and the other religions because I don't feel I have enough insight into them. But I don't dismiss them either. I don't.
I wanted to mention, one thing that was left out of my biography when I was introduced is that I'm very proud to be listed in a reference book called Who's Who in Hell. And it's a very thick book.
My question is for Scott. I consider myself a good person, and as a pastor and a Christian, at what point do you feel it's your job to judge us, people who are not Christians? Because there were a few comments.
Like what?
That you wouldn't want to live next to a non-Christian, or because you should have your gun. So I was just curious, you know.
I believe I said just the opposite. I'd like to live next to anybody that tries to be a good person. Yeah, say for that.
I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just have a quick question for both. Do you believe that it's possible to have heaven on earth?
I think that's the only heaven that's possible. We have no evidence of any afterlife. And that, Scott was saying that heaven makes life here more valuable. Actually, I think it makes it less valuable. And having no heaven makes life here very valuable because it's the only life we have. So we have to have heaven on earth because there's no other heaven to be had as far as we know. So if you're being abused, well, don't think that it's going to be better after you die. Take steps, seek help, try to make your life better here and now.
Yeah. What was I going to say? So yeah, if this life is all there is, make the best of it. That is easy for someone to say who is relatively well off, successful, well fed, and relatively affluent, but that gives no hope whatsoever for people whose every waking hour is a struggle, who might live in constant pain, who are endlessly disappointed, harassed, and put down. And we can say, well, we can go out and change that. Well, yes, we can, but it ain't going to happen real soon. What hope would you have? What hope does your philosophy extend to them that when every day of their life is a struggle and it's disappointment?
Well, you're right. If you're miserable, a fantasy can make you happier, but that doesn't make the fantasy real. And it just puts more onus on us to fix that miserable life.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a question for both of you. Probably mostly towards Mr. Berkshire. I appreciate your thoughts on the studies about animals and compassion and empathy. I think empathy is what should rule the earth. I am a lover of animals myself personally, and have had great relationships with dogs who have meant everything to me, including the current dog Max. This is my question though for both of you. I think your studies beg the question of origin, original cause. We can say that animals have empathy, we can say that people have empathy, but it is overriding the original question I would ask is an ontological question, which means a state of being. Who are we as a being? And I would suggest that maybe the question needs to be addressed by both of you. What is the beginning of the beginning? Now, I would surmise you can't answer it, either one of you, adequately. You cannot answer the question, what is the beginning of the beginning? But until you can answer that question with relative competency, the debate becomes almost moot and becomes a personal choice, a decision, and reaction in regard to defining whether or not God exists. Can you answer what is the ultimate cause?
I think we can easily have morality without knowing what the ultimate cause is. Who are we? We're mammals. We evolved as social beings. We have mirror neurons and empathy circuits in our brains. This explains the evolution of morality in us and other animals. Now, if you want to get to the ultimate cause of everything, which I don't think you need to know to answer the morality question, we don't know if the universe had a beginning, if it existed in some other form before the Big Bang. We just don't know. Our knowledge runs out where the evidence runs out, and the evidence runs out in the material world. Now, we can make guesses. We can say God did it, but God is never an answer to anything, because an answer is supposed to provide us with information. We don't know what a God is. We don't know what mechanism a God uses to do anything. So therefore, God is not an answer. God is just a more complicated question. It's a placeholder. It's a God of the gaps until science finds the real answer, if the real answer is obtainable.
Yes.
I mean, it's an unanswerable question.
It is an unanswerable question. Thank you. Yes. Well, I think it helps to understand that we live on a timeline. We live in a physical universe that had a very definite beginning. Somehow, some way, we're not quite sure. We think we know, but and that's good. That's good. I go along with that. And it will have someday a very definite end. Okay. But then that sort of begs the question, because how did it get started? And who started it? Whose idea was it? And of course, the theist answer is God, who dwells in eternity, which has no beginning and no end. So therefore, the question the small child sometimes asks Mom, well, if God created everything, who created God? Is really kind of a nonsense question, because God, God is in eternity, outside of time-space continuum. Therefore, definitions of beginning and end are irrelevant. Now, granted, that's a mystery. Granted, we can't prove it, but we believe as Christians that has been revealed to us. And as Paul says in Romans chapter 1, God's invisible attributes have been manifested in the creation, so that everyone is without excuse and can't really say, well, there's no evidence for God. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's there. We make the whole book of Romans is based on that assumption, and it's stood the test of time over these years. And like Elizabeth Barrett Brown says, every bush is aflame with God if you want to see it. That's the thing.